You know, when you say that watching a movie directed by Werner Herzog, you're generally not in for what you expect to be in for. It's a bit like saying the sun's going to rise tomorrow. His movies are just so bizarre and so out there that you really have no idea what to expect going in. And so when you think of watching a movie by Werner Herzog that's in a genre that seems different even for him, you know you're in for something special. And that is very much the case in the case of a movie by his called uh, the the Wild Blue Yonder. This is actually a science fiction movie. He calls it a science fiction fantasy that was directed by Werner Herzog and released in the year 2005. And really is. This is one of the strangest science fiction movies I've ever seen, and is really just entirely fascinating all the way through, but really much not for everybody. The thing that makes this movie the strangest, I think, is that this is not a conventional science fiction movie by any means. Like, there's no special effects whatsoever. There's only one real character who we get to know, who builds himself up in terms of narrative and more than anything else. This is essentially a documentary material played for science fiction. I mean, there are shots of this was made kind of in conglomeration with NASA and several nature photographers, and all the shots of in space, all the shots inside spaceships, and even shots that are supposed to be of alien planets are really just documentary nature photography of various locations on Earth. Yeah. And somehow, despite all this, it feels completely authentic all the way through. I mean, like when let me back up a little bit here. The one character who I mentioned before, who this movie's built around, is an alien. The alien is played by Brad Dourif. You know, he was a Grima Wormtongue in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He's basically a very adept actor at playing weirdos, and probably one of the few actors out there who could really be completely believable as an alien. You know, with no makeup or costumes or anything. He plays the one member of a group of aliens who have been living on Earth for hundreds, maybe thousands of years after they've been leaving their own planet, which they call the Wild Blue Yonder, which is often the Andromeda Galaxy or something, in different waves, and eventually settling on Earth. You might wonder how the aliens were able to live on Earth making no real major impact, because, in this say they don't blow up any aliens planets, they don't really create a huge colony of their own on Earth. Well, in the words of Brad Dourif, we aliens all suck. And that's really part of the comedy of this movie. This movie has some really clever, black, dry comedy in it, where he says, the aliens certainly have ambitions to make a big impact on Earth, they just can't because they're bad at it. I mean, and they're technologically advanced, they're smart, they have hundreds and thousands of years of experience because their lifespans are so much longer than those of humans. They just suck at being aliens, which is why nobody takes them seriously, even when like, say, the Brad Dourif character works for the government and is involved in the Roswell cover-up. Nobody ever listens to him because they just don't take the aliens seriously at all. And so, yeah, that's where a big chunk of this movie is actually devoted to creating sort of an alternate history of how the Earth developed during the 1950s and into the future as a result of aliens living there, as told by the Brad Dourif character. This is also intercut with some of Brad Dourif's lectures about how humankind has affected the planet, how their impacts on nature, their impacts on history, how space travel and stuff like that. I think lots of these lectures are actually Brad Dourif kind of acting as Werner Herzog's mouthpiece, as kind of like him saying, giving voice to Herzog's theories about mankind, but really just because Dourif is such an engaging actor. He's just such a quirky and fun guy to watch that you believe what he says, you buy it right outright. The other major part of the movie, aside from this sort of alternate history, is him telling about how a group of humans decide human astronauts are sent off into space to try to find an alternate planet for humans to colonize. There's an explanation of this going in the story, but it really doesn't matter much, and all of this the story about the humans traveling through space trying to find another planet is told through stock footage of humans on humans like on the space shuttle, I guess, or space capsule. This is footage taken from NASA, and it's basically just them doing their thing on the spacecraft. I mean, we never really talked to any of the astronauts directly. We're just kind of like observing them, and lots of this footage could probably become boring to some people. It does drag a little bit at times, maybe, but I found it really fascinating just because this is just so completely different than what you'd expect, so completely uh, uh, unconventional that you really have no idea what's going to happen next. And I just found that very exciting and very fun just to watch, seeing this footage and hearing Brad Dourif's narration and this wonderful music. The music for this movie was composed by a guy who I believe his name is pronounced Ernst Reisiger. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And just having your expectations just confounded so completely is just a really refreshing thing. I really like that part. Also, part of this movie, also intercut with this, are interviews with like scientists who work for NASA, like mathematicians, rocket scientists, where they kind of explain the logistics of space travel and the theories involved with space travel, involving various gravitational pulls, chaos theory, stuff like that. Basically, explaining how Earth astronauts might be able to find a different planet or travel to a different planet sometime in the future, or in the case of this movie, in the present, because the movie is largely narrated and takes place from what would assume to be the future. And yeah, and eventually, after a while, the Earth astronauts actually find themselves at the planet where the Brad Dourif character comes from. This is the planet that he calls the Wild Blue Yonder, and according to the Brad Dourif character, this planet has like a frozen atmosphere with like oceans of liquid helium underneath, and so like Earth astronauts like drill through the atmosphere and start swimming around in these helium oceans, and this is courtesy of more stock footage. This is stock footage of scuba divers swimming under Antarctica that was recorded by a musician and explorer by the name of Henry Kaiser. And this is also another great example of how this movie kind of confounds or manipulates your expectations in terms of what you might expect from a sci-fi movie, because the Brad Dourif character tells us that the animals and planets who live in the oceans of the Wild Blue Yonder are sentient and can communicate with at least his people. So then when we see in this stock footage of the scuba divers, kind of like throwing away the plants, or like poking and prodding at some of the plants and animals that they find in the oceans. You combine that with the way the music kind of like builds in the background, kind of like 2001 style ethereal kind of strange music, really kind of like really builds suspense, because when you're watching a sci-fi movie and you see scientists just behaving so, just disregarding this nature so much, you really have to feel like something's about to happen to them. And you just get that feeling, and it just really continues throughout the entire part. It just makes the footage gives it really kind of dark and almost nasty subtext. It's really kind of amazing just how well Herzog was able to do that. And yeah, this entire movie is basically like that. This was the first movie that Werner Herzog made after that documentary Grizzly Man, and I can actually see it as being a sort of companion piece to that, because while Grizzly Man was taken largely through the found footage of that Timothy Treadwell guy, this is, as I mentioned before, basically documentary footage played as a sci-fi movie. This is essentially factual material that's given a fictional spin and fictional narration to it, and that's just so completely different that I just found it very fascinating. I say, if you're a fan of Werner Herzog, if you'd like to see some sort of sci-fi movie with that's completely radically different than anything you've seen before, I thought you should check this movie out. I liked it a lot. Maybe you'll like it a lot too.